Name is Reginald R. Gayles. R stands for Roger. I was born here in Chicago. I was born on the west side, on Damon and Roosevelt, right down from Jesse Brown, VA. I lived my entire youthful life on the west side. We moved from there farther west to 18th and Harding, which at that time was a Jewish neighborhood. We were the first blacks to move there. And I grew up with, there were 11 of us, just my sister and I. But our families had an uncle who had 4 kids, and my aunt and my grandmother. So we all stayed in a 3-bedroom apartment. So it was 11 of us on Harding. And when we moved over there, the time I moved over there, I contracted scarlet fever. And they wanted to put a quarantine sign on our house. And my grandmother begged because we were the only blacks in the neighborhood, and she didn't want quarantine on the house and scare all the whites. So the guy said, as long as no one came out of the house. So for maybe a month or so, everybody stayed in and people brought us food. I went to Penn School over there, and then we were transferred to Mason, which was a predominantly white school. That's the large picture downstairs I showed you. But by the time we graduated, all the whites had left. And from there, I went to Farragut High School, which is on the west side. And at that time, Farragut was probably 70% white. And before that, my mother went to Farragut. She was the first black to go to Farragut in 1935. And she had to leave because of the racism. And she would tell us stories about when they would go swimming. The moment she got in the pool, all the whites got out. And she transferred from there and went to Inglewood on the south side. And at that time, Inglewood was partially white. So that's how that story went. But I graduated from Farragut. I played basketball. I started in football, but football wasn't for me, you know. Basketball, I played my best sport was baseball. I played baseball with a team on the west side called the Jaguars. And we were pretty good. We would go undefeated year after year. And but when I got to high school, I didn't like to coach, so I just left that alone and concentrated on football and basketball. And one frost-off football game, I had my hand stepped on, and all my fingers were popped out of place. And I asked the coach, could he help me? And he told me, oh, go sit down, we'll take care of that at halftime. And I went in the locker room at halftime. When he came in to take care of my fingers, I was dressed. I said, I'm out of here. I said, I'm going to the gym and play basketball indoors. And that was a new experience because we had just gotten a new coach, a black coach. Our previous coach was white. And at that time, playing at Farragut, it was set up where there were 5 players on a basketball team. 3 of them had to be white, 2 had to be black. Or 2 were black, 3 had to be white. You could not have more blacks on the floor. And when you would send in one black player, he had to go in to replace one of the blacks on the floor. And when we brought the new coach in, his name was Ben Blewett. He played for Loyola. He was the first black to play for Loyola University. He had tryouts, and he picked all black players, and the principal called him in and said, I got to have some white on the team. So he went back and got 2 white managers, and they sat, and that pissed the principal off, boy. But we were winning. We had a dynamite team. I think right now it's about maybe 3 or 4 of us are left. My best friend, his name was Mose Lemon. We went to elementary school, high school. We were roommates in college together. He died maybe 4 years ago. 2 weeks ago, the center on our team, Ronald Dunlap, passed. Roger Blaylock was one of our players. He was assistant coach at Purdue. He passed maybe 8 years ago. So I'm just watching all these guys dropping around me. And I think there's one guy named Hugo Davis. He's might be the only one left, he and I. And as I said, Coach Blewett told us that a coach was coming to Chicago at 71st and South Parkway. That's King Drive now. He said, I want you to go out there and play for him. So Moses and I went out there and we played. But there was like 1,000 kids in the lot out there looking for a scout. He was coming to Chicago to pick a team. And I figured after seeing all those guys, I said, I'd never get down. He's not going to pick me. And 2 weeks later, I got a letter saying, I like your defense, and I'd like for you to join the team. And then he sent one to my boy Mo. So we went down there. But the strange thing, once we got down there were other players from Chicago there, but they were from the South Side. And there's this mythological difference between the sides of Chicago. You got South Siders and West Siders. And they would always introduce themselves as saying, we're all from Chicago, but they're from the West Side. And everybody would say, what's the difference? And my greatest compliment was maybe 10 years ago, we had a convention here in Chicago for Wilberforce. And some of the girls that we were there, she told us that they were afraid of us because we were from the West Side. But she found out that Mose and I were two of the nicest guys that they had ever met. And I said, why don't you all tell us then? And my wife went to Central State, which is a black college, maybe a block or two away from Wilberforce. Wilberforce is the first black private university in the United States. Wilberforce was founded in 1856. So during slavery, the Underground Railroad passed through Wilberforce. And here's the picture of Ali and my uncle. My uncle, he's a fighter himself. His name was John Mallon. He and Joe Louis were stablemates. And my grandmother made Joe Louis first pair of boxing trunks. This my high school basketball, my college basketball. This is my college coach here. This is me. This is a guy he was the mayor of Dayton, Ohio. I met him on the tennis court. We were playing tennis, and after we beat him, the guy introduced me, I want you to meet the mayor. I didn't know we had just beaten the mayor. And this guy here is John McClendon. John McClendon was the first black pro basketball coach. He coached the Cleveland Pipers that developed into the Cleveland Cavaliers. My coach played for him. He played for Naismith, James Naismith, the guy who invented basketball. Prior to going to college, the only place I'd ever been was Battle Creek, Michigan. My mother would send us up there 2 weeks each year to visit friends of hers, and I hated that. I had never been outside of Chicago, outside of Illinois. And when I went to Wilberforce, it was on a basketball scholarship. Wilberforce was one of the poorest black colleges at the time. But in order to get us to sign the papers to come there, Central State and Wilberforce were right next to each other. They gave us a tour of Central State. Because Central State is in Wilberforce, Ohio. So coming down the highway, we saw the sign saying, welcome to Wilberforce. And then they pulled into Central State, and they showed us the gym and everything. And I was saying, boy, I'm going to love it here.
You're across the street.
And once we got down there, They took us back behind. You had Central State, and behind Central State was Wilberforce. We saw that dilapidated. Boy, we were crushed. But the coach had made an agreement with the president of Wilberforce. He said, if you allow me to pick my team, I'll guarantee you we'll have a championship team in 3 years. So they gave him that freedom. And we were champions after the first year. Some of the notable players, there's a rapper called Common. His real name is Lonnie Lynn. His father played basketball. His name was Lonnie Lynn also. He was our center at Wilberforce. We had a guy by the name of Ben Kendrick who founded Chicago Youth Centers on the west side. He was our leading scorer my freshman year. So there are a number of, my buddy Mo, who went to elementary school, he was with me. We had a guy named Larnell Height from Hirsch High School. He was there. Mike Washington from Dunbar.
Okay. So you got a lot of notable.
All of us just came down there and we came together. Okay. And I won't tell you why we ended up forfeiting our first 20 games my freshman year.
Why was that?
Because a player on our team came from another team and didn't sit out. Okay. And we were getting ready to play Central State. And Central State knew we had a monster, and he blew the whistle. So the player had to step down, and then as a result of that, we forfeited. We were 22-2 at the time, and we had to forfeit 20 of the games. So I majored in comprehensive social science, became a history teacher. That got me involved in Black history because, at Wilberforce, my work study was cleaning the auditorium after movies. We had movies twice a week. And you had all of these science, W.B. Du Bois, Thomas Paine, Richard Allen, all of them all the presidents along the wall at Wilberforce. And you got to, asking questions about it, and you found out. Even now, when I go down, my wife is from Dayton, Ohio. And I met her at Central State, but she came to Wilberforce for a dance.
What year did you meet your wife?
Probably, I graduated in 68, probably 65. She graduated in 65 from high school. I graduated in 63. And I was a sophomore when she got there. And she just came over to Wilberforce for a dance. And I saw her at the dance. And we hooked up and started talking, and we've been together 50 years now.
We met at a dance at Central State. I went to the dance with my girlfriend, and we walked in the door, and he evidently had noticed my girlfriend and I, and I forgot we were separated by a really tall guy that was probably maybe 6'3" or 6'4", and a friend of his made him a bet for 50 cents that he wouldn't ask me to dance.
Well, the dance was at Wilberforce, not Central State.
Oh, that's right.
It was in the Student Union stub. When the guys, basketball players, we always waited on girls to come in. We never took girls to dances. We'd wait for someone to come in with a girl, and we'd try to steal her and keep her for the whole dance. And when she came in, it was my turn up, and the guy bet me 50 cents. You want, because he was a big, tall guy, was about 6'7" behind her. And I went and swooped her away, and we danced and danced and danced. The guy who I thought she was with never saw her again that night. And it took me maybe 10, 15 years to decide to go back and get a master's. Only reason I got a master's degree is that one of my students came back and he'd gotten his master's degree. His name was Mark Randolph. He was at Harper High School. And he said, "Mr. Gayles, you got your master's yet?" And I didn't have him. And I told him, "Yeah, I got it." But then I went and got it. And I got my master's from the University of Illinois, Urbana. And I got my principal certificate, administration certificate at Lewis University, and I think that's in Naperville.
So What year was that when you got your master's?
76,
76. And you got married in what year?
68.
68. Okay. Any kids?
I've got two. My daughter passed 3 years ago. My son, right now, he's into hip hop music. He does jingles and things for Big Ten. And at one time he was on E Television out of Hollywood. He would do the daily news on E in rap form. My wife was a flight attendant. She flew for maybe 27 years. That gave us a chance to see the world. We didn't go to Africa. We were going to Africa, but it canceled. We went to Italy. We went to England. We stayed in the islands, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad. We went to South America. So we did a lot of traveling.
Appreciate it.
My father, he taught geography. And then before he got ill, he was teaching at Chicago State. He taught geography at Chicago State. And one of the strangest things that would happen, whenever in college, when you are going to be absent, you would get someone, you had to get your own substitute. And he was always asking me, could you come sub for me? And I'd go in, and we looked a little alike, but I'd go and put my name on the board, Mr. Gayles, and the kids in the class would look at me, staring at me, and say, you look different this week, Mr. Gayles. I said, no, I'm the same. They said, but you don't look, as old as you did last week. And I had to finally tell them, that's my father. Growing up on the west side, we grew up in the beginning of the gang era. Vice Lords, the Clovers, the Egyptian Cobras. Those were all the gangs but back then, if you were an athlete, they gave you a pass. You'd be walking through their neighborhood. All you had to do is take your hat off and carry it in your hand, and then you didn't want any trouble. And when I say death, playing basketball at Farragut, my buddy Mo and I, we were coming home. There was a fight at Farragut during the day one day at lunchtime. And this black guy was a boxer. We had two school stores. He had Steve's, which is a white school store, and our school store didn't even have a name. Steve's had jackets, sweaters, chairs, and tables in there. Our school store, which was directly across the street, you had to stand and eat. So this one black guy, I think his name was Eddie, he said, I'm tired of this. He went over to Steve's store that day. We were all looking out the window to see what happened, and he come running out of the store, and he started fighting. And he was knocking white guys out left and right. And then the cops came and broke it up, and we thought it was over with. But by being on the basketball team, we didn't get out of school until 6 that evening. And it was pitch black, and we were walking down 23rd and Holman on the west side. In time we got ready to cross the street, this Lincoln convertible, not Lincoln, it was the Oldsmobile 98 convertible, pulled in front across the crosswalk. And the shotgun came out the window. And they said, get on your knees, niggers. And we slowly got out on our knees, there was 4 of us. And they said, start praying. And I happened to look up, and there was a kid I went to elementary school in the back seat of that car. And I said, his name was Terry Agnello. Never forget it. I said, Terry, you gonna let them do this to me? Because we were tight in elementary school. And they said, Terry, you know him? He said, yeah, well, I know him. He said, what type of a guy? He said, he's cool. They said, well, niggas, get up and start running. And we dodged a bullet that night. One summer at Farragut, we went to Harrison High School summer school. And we were walking down 23rd Street again. And at 23rd and Whipple, there was a milk company. And someone hollered out the window, don't come this way tomorrow. And we said, we go. We didn't even see who said it. So the next day we were walking through there, and we heard a gunshot. And we looked around, this guy named Matthew Talbot, who was walking maybe 4 feet behind us, dropped. And we started running. They shot it and killed him right there. I taught at Manly. From Manly, I went to Harper. From Harper, I went to Martin Luther King. And from Martin Luther King, I was at Dunbar, and I retired at Dunbar.
What year you retired?
2005. That was the year my father died, and I figured I might as well just give it up myself. And I've got a friend, I'm not going to mention his name, but he's got a group he wants to start where we go and talk to young kids. But I can't do that because I feel I've done as much as I can. And with kidney failure, 3 days of my week is already taken up. Sunday, it's got to be football. And I only got 2 days left, and I'm going to have to, my wife and my son, I got to devote that to them. So it's hard to give it to some more other kids. If there's something I can do, I'll talk to them briefly, but I can't dedicate. I've got counselors who say, Gayles, you still got. I was a counselor. I started counseling in. I went from Manly to Harper, and I was teaching. I taught Afro history 2 years at Harper. And in '72, they made me a counselor. So I became a high school counselor and was a counselor all the way up until I retired. Most proud? Having a family and taking care of my family, being able to take care of my family. I feel like I failed my daughter because she passed, and I wish she had been able to. She didn't die from anything. Her husband got sick, and she was so in love with her husband, she would go and spend the night in the hospital, sleep at the foot of his bed on a cot. He was in a coma, and she developed sepsis. She picked up a virus in the hospital, and she died while he was still in the coma. He didn't die until, he never knew she was there. He never knew she got sick, and he died maybe 6 months after she did. And she went in there totally healthy. And but I feel my greatest accomplishment was dealing with all the kids I've had at Dunbar, King. I can name names like Marcus Liberty, who was one of the best ball players. He was one of my counselees. Ephraim Winters was at King. There's a kid named Richard Griffin, 7-footer. He's assistant coach at Wisconsin now. He never went to the NBA, did all his playing overseas. All of those kids I've worked with. I've had kids who played on the basketball team because I coach basketball also. They've come back, they've gotten their masters, they're principals now. So those are the ones that there's one story I'd like to tell you. There's one kid, I can't think of his name. He was in my class at Manly. And I was passing out papers, and I bumped his leg, and a gun fell out of his pocket. And I said, what's this? And he said, nothing. So I took his gun from him. I said, you're not getting this back. And after that night, I didn't see him for a couple of weeks. And when he finally came back to school, he had bandages on. And I said, what happened? He said, I got into a fight after school a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just getting out of the hospital. I said, did you learn a lesson from that? He said, yeah, never let you take my gun again. And I felt bad, but I was saying, but had he had a gun, he wouldn't have been able to come back to school. And that, I think he's doing okay. I haven't seen him recently, but I saw him once since then, and he was doing pretty good. I had one other kid who challenged me in class at Harper. He challenged me to a fight. And I didn't want to fight the kid, but he wanted to fight in class. So he took my papers and threw them up into my chest and said, get up. And I said, and the kids in the class were looking. So when I got up, I hit him, knocked him down. And the kids laughed, and I said, don't laugh. And I just told him, go back and get in your seat. And after he saw that, he went and got back in his seat. And the principal called us, and the kids told him, I didn't report him. So the principal called us down and said, I understand you had a problem in your class. I said, I didn't have a problem. He said, this young man here, you got into I said, do we have a problem? The kid said, no. I said, we don't have a problem. About 6 months later, I'm sitting at my desk, and this Marine comes to the door in full dress, and it was that kid. And he knocked on the door, and I said, "Oh, brother, he's back." And I wouldn't go to the door, and kids said, "So-and-so's at the door, Mr. Gayles, you want to go?" I said, "Yeah, let him in." He came in the door, and he said, "I just came to thank you." He said, "Had you not done that, I wouldn't have been where I am today." I would tell them to learn their history, because you think you're doing something for the first time, but someone before you have already tried that. And you'll find out whether or not they were successful, and if they made mistakes, what mistakes they made, and try to avoid those mistakes. I always tell kids, you don't want to work, you want to work more with your mind than with your body. You last longer. You don't want to do manual labor, that hard labor. And a lot of kids, like the kid who came back and said, "Have you got your master's?" Because once you inspire them, they'll come back and they'll inspire you to go further.
Listen. Woke up this morning and rubbed my eyes. Took me a second, but I realized that I'm still the same man I was yesterday. See, I made a promise to myself to make a change and better myself, but I don't feel any difference, and that's a shame. All I want is to be a better man. All I need is to clean the slate again, but I know the change, no, it don't come easy. Friends, you all know how it is. They got your back and they just a phone call away. But this is something I've gotta do for myself. I'm thankful, but I can't take that help. Gotta do this my way, my way, my way. Just to be a better man. Clean the slate again, but I know the change, no, it don't come easy. Change, no, it don't come easy to me. Change, change, all I want is change.